as the Kentucky Derby prep season just keeps on trucking. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It is your boy El Hombre, Trust the Prophets, bringing you the top 25 Kentucky Derby contenders updated once again. Matthew DeSantis joins me tonight to talk this through, and Matt's got all the latest and greatest updates right up to the minute here, and we've got a little bit of a dilemma on a couple of the horses and trainer, the Baffert situation. We'll go through all that. Matt, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing well. You know, excited. It feels like we're really the last couple of weeks, really the last 4 or 5 weeks before prep season is actually over. And, but still so many big races to be run, obviously, for this weekend, the Gotham, the San Felipe, the Fountain of Youth, and the Battaglia at Turfway Park. So 4 prep races this weekend, but obviously people are still, I think there's a lot of reverberations from what took place in the Rebel Stakes this past weekend and is reflected on our top 25.
Absolutely. Let's take a look. We're going to start at the bottom here and talk these through, top 25. As a quick note, on the left side, you see the rankings. If it's in pink like that, it's a first-timer to the list or a newcomer to the list this week. And those are actually only 2 this week that you'll see that way. So our list didn't change that drastically this week, except there was a couple major drops, a couple major runs up the pole here. We'll cover those as well. And then the last note real quick is on the right, the next race, if you see it highlighted in that pinkish color again, that means that horse is active this weekend, either the San Felipe, Gotham, or the Fountain of Youth. So let's rock and roll here. Jace's Road at number 25, a Brad Cox quality road joint. Horse has been on our list all year. What are we doing? Why no plan on this horse yet? I mean, what's the latest?
I think that's really suspicious, actually, that there is no plan on this horse. And this was kind of my argument when I've talked about this horse with others is I just don't know where this horse is going. And I don't know where this horse fits into Brad Cox's ideas. This horse does not like the slop, and really those 2 efforts on off-track conditions have really been bad. His other efforts aren't bad, should be able to get a classic distance. But again, it feels like there's other Cox horses that are better, and I just don't know where they're shipping him or moving him. And I think that's pretty obvious by the fact that there's no intended plans for his next race yet. So we'll see. I mean, he feels like a horse that could be dropping off this list next week with all of the big prep races coming up this coming weekend.
Yeah, I think any horses that are scoring anything in the top 2 or 3 positions in all 3 of the majors this weekend will be kind of had their ticket punched to the Derby, because we know there's going to be a big shortage on points with the Baffert situation in California, blah, blah, blah. At 24 is one of those newcomers to the list, Eyeing Clover, but another Brad Cox, and Brad Cox is just all over the place in this list. I mean, he's got so many horses in play right now. It's ridiculous, but he is running the Gotham this weekend.
Yep.
Sired by Looking at Lucky. What do we know on this horse, and what do you think his odds are in the Gotham this weekend?
You know, it's interesting. I'm not sure what David Aragona is going to put him at in the Gotham, but I think he's got a real shot because it's not the strongest field up there in New York. And I think that's an important thing to remember out of all these circuits. It's probably the weaker of the circuits between Florida, kind of the Midwest, if you want to say, the Fairgrounds, Oaklawn, and then the California circuit. And then there's the New York circuit. I think New York's probably the weakest of the 4. That's not to say there are not good horses there, because there are some good ones that we'll talk about later. But Eyeing Clover specifically is 2 for 2, has not done nothing wrong, has won a maiden race and an allowance race, both at 6 furlongs. So horses stretching out for the first time should be able to handle the distance, but still it's going to be a big test. But I do feel like it's a gettable field. I think you'll actually maybe get some decent odds on this horse, maybe 7-2 or something like that.
All right. At 23, also competing this weekend, but in the San Felipe on the California side of things, Go Rocket Ride. Richard Mandela by Candy Ride, also new to the list. What are we doing? The San Felipe is pretty stacked. This field is pretty scary. I mean, we made the argument last week that the Rebel was stacked, and now I came away a little bit disappointed in that Rebel, to be honest. But the San Felipe looks stacked, and obviously the Fountain of Youth has a couple major contenders that we'll get to later. But Go Rocket Ride, first timer on the list. What do we know?
Richard Mandela horse, 1 time out And now going into the San Felipe, won his maiden, beat a Bob Baffert horse, Sonoran, in that maiden. So that was obviously, whenever you beat a Baffert horse out in California, you kind of get anointed as a potentially pretty special one. Ran a really big speed figure first time out. You got to like that Candy Ride siring line. You saw that be successful with another horse that's going to be a little higher up on our list who won this past weekend. But I think you mentioned how stacked it is. The San Felipe 11 horse field. I think Go Rocket Ride could finish like 5th and be a very legitimate horse. It's going to be a hard task for him this weekend.
Absolutely. Moving up to 22 is one of my Derby darlings, if not my favorite horse of the early prep season, Verifying, who's coming off a disappointing 4th. Have we seen? I mean, was that a fair assessment on him? I don't think there was a lot of big excuses there, but it was not ideal. The conditions weren't perfect. Does Verifying have another shot to quote unquote justify himself here in the Derby mix?
I think so. And I'll give you 2 reasons. One, that pace was incredibly fast, and he was right up on that pace. Out of the top 4 horses that were on the pace, he finished in the highest position. So he held on. The second thing is, if you watch that race back, which I've done a few times, Florent Giroux had no idea what he was doing with Verify on the inside, coming around the 3rd and 4th turn. He didn't know the inside path didn't open. He didn't know whether to go out. He hesitated. Verifying kind of got caught in traffic, was weaving out, was weaving back in, losing momentum. Was not an ideal ride for him. So I do feel like another shot, probably the Arkansas Derby. I think Verifying still has something left to show in this Derby season.
Yeah, I think he's got a higher ceiling than we saw there, but who knows? It wasn't a horrendous trip, but it definitely did not seem like an ideal setup. And hopefully we'll see him back a little higher. I'm sure they'll make an announcement on what he's doing next year in the next few days. 21, Tappett's Conquest. Brad Cox, 4 out of 5 of our bottom 5 here. And that's just the beginning. He's got so many more coming up.
He does.
Why do we have Tappett's Conquest so high? I know there was a little bit of a issue with his last race.
Yeah, 4th place, but a very close 4th in the Risen Star. And I think by watching that race replay, he was gaining ground at the end. You just keep stretching him out. He's going to keep getting better. And so I just think he's a horse that is going to relish that classic distance, not surprisingly sired by Tappet. And pointed to that at Louisiana Derby. I think you're only, I don't think you've seen the best of this horse yet.
Yep, and you're right about the Tappet sired horses. They tend to want that distance and get better with the distance. So let's move along. Number 20, Practical Move, also in the San Felipe. Has now, or one of Yak-Teen has a bunch of them now. I mean, the Baffert brigade has started, and most of them have moved to Yak-Teen. So Practical Move, one of those, running in the San Felipe at number 20. By Practical Joke. What's new with Practical Move?
Continuing to light up the workout track. This horse continues to just fire off bullets, and super impressive 4 or 5 furlong works out at Santa Anita. So now he is going to be coming back from quite a long layoff. He last ran in the Los Alamitos Futurity. So we're talking about some other horses coming off long layoffs this week in some of these prep races, but he is as well. He is an organic Yak-Teen, if you will, meaning that he was always a Tim Yak-Teen horse. But I think a little bit like Go Rocket Ride, he could run like 4th and I think still be like a really strong contender potentially for the Derby, because it's just a really stacked field. But I think this horse has a real shot, and I think this is a really, really good horse.
Agreed. I'm very interested to see him. And again, that's a stacked San Felipe. So the winner coming out of there is going to have their work cut out for him. Number 19, Kings Barnes, up a few spots. Going after the Tampa Bay Derby. Pletcher's got these next couple here. Why is Kings Barnes on the radar so heavily? He's another one that's moved up recently. Yeah,
so impressive. And probably, in my opinion, a slightly better version of Eyeing Clover, who is a little further down on our list, in that second time out, Kings Barnes stretches out, does the 2 turns, blows away allowance competition. I actually think he's better than Litigate, and I think we're going to see that at the Tampa Bay Derby coming up. But, Pletcher's starting to really unleash his barn as well. We talk a lot about the Brad Coxes, but there's a lot of Todd Pletcher horses that are suddenly on our top 25 list.
And I agree. Again, this is a consensus top 25 between a few of us here. So Matt saying he believes Kings Barnes is a little higher than Litigate. I believe I did too, but that's why we have a few of us doing this, kind of check each other. And it's interesting to see how it comes out overall. And at 18 is Litigate, the other Pletcher. Also, yeah, these two will go heads up in a couple weeks. So we'll see. We'll know for sure when that happens, which one of these is going to be the leading candidate out of that little grouping.
Yeah, and Litigate's done nothing wrong. I mean, by no stretch, won the Sam F. Davis, but I think that was an ideal trip, and a lot of his biggest competition had really bad trips that day. So it'll be interesting to see if he faces a horse kind of straight up and what comes out of that race on a. That was also a track that was really souped up for front end speed that day. So we'll see. But I just think Kingsbarn has the higher upside. But like I said, Litigate's done nothing wrong.
Absolutely. Faustin at 17, down from number
Mhm.
11 last week, and there's a reason for that, right? Because the
Yeah.
Curlin sired horse here is still under the Baffert tent as of
Yep.
today. It's Monday.
Monday, the
If
February
you're watching
27th.
this,
Yeah.
if you're watching this a day or two later, the news may have shifted, but that's where we're at today. So with that, a little bit of doubt comes to the Derby trails. What's going to happen with Faustin? I believe the date for him to move is about to expire here, so he either has to move out of the Baffert barn or he will be officially off the trail here. So
Yeah, exactly.
that's why he dropped a little bit.
And that's exactly why I dropped. And it's funny, as you were talking, I'm refreshing my Twitter because news is breaking like every second it feels like on this, but a number of Baffert horses got moved to Tim Yakteen's barn. Faustin and one other Baffert horse were not announced as part of that move. And so, as you said, they're still trained by Bob Baffert officially, which means they are ineligible for Derby points. They have until Tuesday, February 28th at midnight to be transferred. So they really has a little over 24 hours to get transferred. And if they are not transferred by the time you wake up on Wednesday, March 1st, that means they're off the Derby trail.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the only reason he's dropped a little bit. I think we're all pretty high on that horse.
Yes,
Number
obviously.
16, National Treasure, up a few spots. He has moved to the Yakteen barn. This is a non-OG Yakteen horse.
Yeah.
Also running this weekend in San Felipe. What are the chances on National Treasure? Because he to me looks like one of those Hot Rod Charlie / Midnight Bourbon, always in the hunt, but never a bride type of a horse here.
Yeah, always bridesmaid, never a bride. Yeah, I think that's probably a fair comparison to make. I do think he just likes more and more distance. And so I think the more you stretch him out, the more he's got a shot. Here's the thing. He's been working out with Reincarnate this entire time leading up to this. Now, we just watched Reincarnate run in the Rebel Stakes. We're going to talk about that horse in a second. And I was actually pretty impressed by what he did that day. So if you think Reincarnate was, revved up and ready to go, then National Treasure, you should kind of think the same thing about here. I think he's got a big shot at the San Felipe. I'm excited to see him. He's been a big favorite of mine for a while. And so we'll see this weekend though. Yep.
Dangerous to hit the board at a minimum. For my spot, I wouldn't leave him out underneath anything. But moving into the top 15, Sun Thunder's up a few spots.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming off a great run last weekend. He's targeting the Louisiana Derby. Everybody's favorite trainer, Kenny McPeak's highest horse here into Mischief.
Yeah.
What do we have on Sun Thunder? He got the staying? Does he have the staying power? Is he going to be in the gate?
Well, hard to say, but I think probably. And I think he is a horse that honestly had his form flattered a little bit more this past weekend with Red Route 1 running as well as he did. Because he finished right behind Red Route 1 in that Southwest. That Southwest has come back pretty strong. So I think that Sun Thunder, you go, okay, the only really bad performance was again on sloppy conditions. This horse ran a really nice effort at the Risen Star, finishing second place, showed that this horse likes the distance. Again, in not an overwhelming Derby field, seems like a contender to certainly be in the starting gate.
All right. Agreed. Number 14, Angel of Empire coming off the win.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we have more faith in this horse as a group here? This horse just won. I mean, he's down a few spots. He's obviously getting enough respect to make this list. Coming off a win. Is it just because that field was maybe not as tough as we thought? What are we doing here?
It's funny. I was a little surprised to see he dropped this much. And because I do like Angel Empire, I think he's only going to get better with more distance. I think the question is the speed figure was not overwhelming. That he came back with. He came back with he came back with like an 83 buyer speed figure for that win. So not a huge number. And I think when you stack him up to horses that are above him on this list, they've all run much faster. So again, you don't want to take anything away from the laurels that the horse has earned to this point, but I think it's legitimate to go, is he really stack up to where some of these other horses that are above him are? But from a Derby's point standpoint, I mean, he's in the starting gate at the Kentucky Derby. There's no doubt about it.
For sure. Yeah. Agreed. And he's one of those that, I'd like to see, we need to see one more out of all these horses really, but yeah, he kind of reminds me of maybe like a Cyberknife who got an early win last year and wasn't super overwhelming, but then he came back and really drove it home with more success later and really convinced those who were doubting him early. Number 13, Reincarnate by Good Magic, another Yak teen. No plan as of this weekend. He's coming off. What did he finish? Third there?
Finished third in
that was an impressive, like you said, he actually moved up with a third place. That tells you that I think more than one of us were pretty happy with the performance, even though he wasn't on top.
Yeah, I mean, he was pinched at the start. He's a horse that has traditionally on dirt, at least, always needed the lead. He's also a horse that doesn't pass other horses. When you go back and look at his running lines, he never passed anybody. If he started second in a race, he finished second in the race.
Yeah.
If he started third in the race, he finished third in the race. And when he got out and broke to the lead, he won the race. And so you figured he would be on the lead, pinched at the start, was sitting, I think, 9th out of 12. I want to say early on in that race, was sitting pretty far back, and then came charging like no tomorrow, coming around the far turn and coming for home. Got kind of bumped by Bourbon Bash as well. I know John Velasquez was really upset about Red Route 1, but it wasn't Red Route 1. It was Bourbon Bash that kind of floated out on him. And, so he had some trouble, but finished a hard charging third. I was really impressed. He handled the wet conditions. He ran well outside of California, which is, sometimes a big deal for these California horses. And he showed a new dimension to himself that he doesn't need the lead and he can come from off the pace. So I thought it was actually a very professional and really good effort from Reincarnate this past weekend.
Yeah, and an unplanned new dimension too. Like I saw that start and I said, okay, he's done, because I didn't have him bet. So I was kind of relieved. He wasn't in any of my bets, so I was kind of relieved. I was like, okay, he's out. Yeah. Then, like you said, he was impressive down the stretch. And who knows what would have happened there if he would have got a decent start.
Yeah.
Number 12. This one is the one this is the horse I'm looking forward to seeing maybe the most this weekend outside of our consensus number 1 all season, which we'll get to in a second here. But Hijazi running this weekend, I think has the upside of anybody on the list.
Yeah,
coming out of the Yak Clean barn.
Yeah,
what do we think here? I mean,
I think
he's
the
got
only
a legit
question
shot in San Felipe, you think, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only question about Hijazi is the distance. I think the horse has the speed for days, and I think the only question is he a classic 2-turn horse, or is he better at a 1-turn? And I think there may be some questions there about how much he likes the 2 turns, but he's got incredible talent. He's got incredible speed. And quite frankly, on this year's Derby Trail, we've not really seen jaw-dropping early speed.
Right.
We've not seen like, oh my God, like that horse can really fly. So he fits that bill. And I mean, he looks the part, that's for sure. He looks like one of those California horses that can wire the field. So, I'm excited to see him too. I'm excited to see what he can do.
Agreed. That may be what I'm so used to those Baffert having 1 or 2 or Yak Teen, whoever we want to give credit to, but having at least 1 or 2 of those horses that blaze to the front like unbelievable speed and stay there.
Yeah.
You see that every year out of Baffert's barn.
Yeah.
Hijazi may be that one this year. We'll see. Speaking of blazing speeds, Blazing Sevens at number 11. Chad Brown's looks like his only hopeful this season, really. I mean, maybe somebody will pop up late, but where we at on Blazing Sevens, who is in the Fountain of Youth here?
He is. He's in the Fountain of Youth, second choice at 7-2. In the Fountain of Youth. And I'll be honest, so he's number 11 on our list. He might be around there for mine too, but I'm kind of maybe I'm a little more lukewarm on Blazing Sevens. He hasn't run since the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So, obviously coming off a long layoff to run in that Fountain of Youth. The other question I think, which is fair to ask, which is his biggest win was in the Slop and the Grade 1 Champagne. Is he a product of wet conditions? How is he going to handle a dry track? Now, he broke his maiden on a dry track, but then he got beat pretty handily in the Hopeful the second time out, and he got beat pretty easily in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So there are questions about Blazing Sevens. He could come out and look, beautiful on Saturday in the Fountain of Youth. I always like that good Magic siring line. Chad Brown, you mentioned the only one he has. So you figure all of his attention is going to be on Blazing Sevens. We'll see on Saturday.
Super interesting to see. I mean, if Brown doesn't have a legit Derby horse after this weekend, I'll be surprised. So
yep.
We'll see. He could get there. Top 10. Here we go. Number 10, up a few spots. Rocket Can. Are we respecting his effort a little more going into the Fountain of Youth this weekend?
Well, I think he had his form flattered a little bit by Confidence Game. Confidence Game beat him
Definitely.
2 races back. And we obviously just saw what Confidence Game did at the Rebels. So I think because of that, he goes up in people's estimations. It should be pointed out, he's actually 8-1 on the morning line at the Fountain of Youth. So he's a much bigger long shot than Blazing Sevens, who we have one below. But Rocket Can we've seen him run this year. And he didn't come back with a huge number in that Holy Bull from a buyer speed figure standpoint, but that was the first time off the bench. Second time you figure is going to be a little bit better. Bill Mott's barn is super hot right now. We saw what he did over in Saudi Arabia with Casa Creed with Elite Power, but he was doing it back here at home with Candyman Rocket down at Gulfstream Park. This is a month after he finished 1-2 in the Holy Bull and won the Pegasus World Cup. So, I mean, you can't really find much hotter trainer than Bill Mott right now, despite, us talking about Brad Cox and Bob Baffert and these other guys. Bill Mott's barn is super hot right now.
And if you don't like the 8-1 morning line odds, maybe you could tune in on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. Pete Aiello will be joining myself, possibly another guest. We'll figure that out later, to discuss Fountain of Youth Day in depth, especially the Fountain of Youth Stakes, including Rocket Can. And we will take it up with him about those morning lines, because as far as I know, Pete's the one still making those morning lines over there at Gulfstream.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, I love the morning line because there's plenty of value to be had in that morning line.
I mean, the horse, even coming off, even directly after the win, I don't think anybody was, locking him in as a top 3 contender. So I think that's about right. And I also don't think anybody's going to sit here and say the horse has no shot in the Fountain of Youth either. So
right. And that's what 8-1 kind of tells me. I mean, I always think of 8-1 horses as like, hey, they got a shot, but they're just not like one of the 2 or 3 favorites. That's all. And I think that's a fair assessment of Rocket Can. So, I look forward to that conversation with Pete. That'll be good.
Number 9, one of the highest, most highly discussed horses of the year, coming off of a stellar 2022. You got the Baffert name attached here. We know what the situation is with that. Same as Faustin down below. We'll have to play this one by ear. If he goes, is he going to be ready? Is he a legit contender? Does he need to be off? I mean, he could be off this list, whether we agree on it or not after Wednesday. But does he belong this high? If he goes to Yak-Teen or somewhere else, does he deserve this rating, or should we, start passing him by a little bit?
Well, I think he definitely deserves the rating based upon what he's done. I do think he's got one shot, and that's the same thing with Faustin. Honestly, Faustin's got one shot to get the points because they're not in the San Felipe. So there's really no other preps that they're going to be able to get into before the Arkansas and Santa Anita Derbies. That's their next stop. And
honestly, if Cave Rock was not ready, that makes all the sense in the world to hold him off as late as possible.
Sure.
And if you really think he's that talented, you put him in the Santa Anita Derby and go win that, and you're in anyway. So
but I mean, he's got to be with somebody else. He's got to be with somebody else's barn to be able to do that. Just like Faustin, we'll learn that in the next 24 hours. And it's, I personally hope we get to see it, because that rematch with Forte Cave Rock from last year was a classic. Absolutely.
You hate to see a legit contender lose out for, some anomaly, but
absolutely. And he did register his 3rd consecutive work. So, we'll see with Cave Rock. He is back on the workout tab. He just was off for a really long time. So, like I said, we'll have more news next week. He could be off the list. Next week, he could be a lot higher on this list.
All right. These next 3 are all an interesting grouping here. Number 8, Two Phils, who is coming off of a couple impressive races, but no wins, yet he finds himself in the top 10. I mean, no wins in the last couple preps. Hard spun, Larry Ravelli barn, targeting the Louisiana Derby. I think we all liked him because he has run tough in both of his prep races so far. He's scoring points. He looks very comfortable up, in that podium top 3 spot each time. He has not closed out and won one yet, but
It's funny.
He
You
does look like
mentioned,
he's going to make the gate.
yeah, you mentioned Midnight Bourbon earlier. He's got a different running style, but he's got a very similar, I think, pattern of just like he's going to finish underneath a lot. He's not a horse that's going to get you home, I don't think, but he's just going to keep racking up Kentucky Derby points, and he's like the most legitimate horse to this point that we probably feel is definitely going to be in the field. I mean, Angel of Empire obviously having won, but Two Phils, yeah, it just feels like an honest horse, and he feels like a horse that's going to do the exact same thing in the Kentucky Derby. Kind of like what Simplification did, which is like finish underneath at a big price, finish fourth in the Kentucky Derby like Simplification did. I mean, it's one of those things. If Rich Strike doesn't win that race, everybody's talking about Simplification hitting the board in that case at like 35-1. So, he feels like the same type of horse. Exactly. Feels like the same type of horse. We'll just run honest.
Yep, agreed 100%. And speaking of running honest, maybe the biggest closing kick out of the whole list. Red Route 1 coming off his second big closer, flashing huge closing speed there. Probably moved him a little late. I think the connections and jockeys are learning a little bit about, I personally think if they moved him a little sooner, he could have got home this past weekend. But Steve Asmussen and Gunrunner sired horse here. The sky's the limit for Red Route 1. I just think he's. I mean, if you're a closer person in the Derby, I'm typically not. But if you are, I think this is going to be the horse you're looking for as the best closer in the group. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely the best closer in the group. The question is, he's just got to put himself in a better position early. He just can't find himself 19 lengths back, which is what happened this past weekend. And he just gives himself too much to do. And then he comes running like heck late. And he just, again, feels like a horse that's maybe going to tease a little bit. And you're always going to think, the next race, maybe another furlong.
Yeah.
It's just like there's that element of it. And it's like, it's just kind of the horse he is. Until he gets home, it's hard to really trust him as a win candidate, or even use him as a win candidate, because he hasn't gotten home and he hasn't won many races. And that's the thing is, he's won, broke his maiden. I think he's won one other race, but he's running a bunch of other races and he just doesn't win very often, but he runs like hell at the end and gets you excited. That's for sure. So, he's going to continue to do that. And it should be pointed out the last two efforts in the slop. So will be interesting to see him on a dry, fast track.
Yeah, he's one of those closers where you can physically see like a 20-mile-an-hour speed difference. It looks like it looks wild.
Yeah.
But and when you're coming too late, none of that matters. Number 6, same position as last week. Hit Show in that New York circuit. I don't know. Is he the best of the New York circuit? Maybe, but
I think so. I think he's pretty clearly the class. It's just not a very strong field. I mean, you have Arctic Arrogance is kind of another horse that he beat. I actually think you go back and watch that Withers. Compared to the other Kentucky Derby preps, that Withers performance really is pretty good. I mean, I would argue that Withers performance is right behind what we saw in the Rebel and probably behind the Southwest, and is probably the third best Derby prep we've seen to this point. So I think you got to give a lot of respect to Hit Show, and he just feels like a lock for the starting gate, especially staying up in New York, where I think he's just going to rack up a ton of points.
Yeah, I think that's why he's getting a lot of support from our whole group as a consensus here, staying up that high. Let's move to the top 5, because this is where we're at here. Number 5, Tappet Trice, yet to run in a major. Tampa Bay Derby up next for him. I think the sky's the limit for Tappet Trice. And if Verifying is not legit, this may be my my horse to latch onto for the ride here. Definitely was on with him in Verifying up until this point, and I like Tappet Trice a lot. That last race out was super impressive. Again, he hasn't raced anybody yet, so we'll find out. But very impressive. Where are you on Tappet Trice?
Yeah, very impressive. It'll be interesting to see the route he takes. Tampa Bay Derby. Obviously, he ran on the Holy Bull undercard, not coming back in the Fountain of Youth, going to the Tampa Bay Derby. Now, here's the thing. You're going to need to run again between the Tampa Bay Derby and the Kentucky Derby. Tampa Bay Derby is middle of March. You're going to need to run at least one more time. We'll probably go to the Bluegrass, I would imagine, and then go from there. But I always think that Tampa Bay Derby leaves horses in a weird spot a little bit because it's like, do you wheel them back on 3 weeks to run somewhere else? Do you give them 8 weeks off, 7 weeks off before the Derby? It's just a weird spot, I think, to be in. We saw this last year with Classic Causeway, where he wins the Tampa Bay Derby, and then they run him like 2 weeks later down at the Florida Derby just to get him in shape, basically, for the, it just didn't work. And so that's the only thing I'm worried about with Tapit Trice, because the talent is undeniable. He's got a ton of talent. I think he can do the distance. The question is just going to be, how does he get to the Kentucky Derby? But absolutely have to consider him one of the favorites at the Tampa Bay Derby.
For sure. Number 4 up from 24. This was the most impressive horse coming out of the weekend for sure. Was Confidence Game, the winner out of Keith DeSormo's barn here. Another Candy Ride.
Yeah.
I was pretty impressed here. I mean, we had seen flashes in the past. I didn't think he was going to win this weekend, but
yeah,
he did it, and he did it. I wouldn't say easily, but he did it convincingly.
Yeah, did it with style, and he did it in a way that we've never seen him win before. He was always a horse that when he won, he was on the lead, and he never really demonstrated the ability to come from off the lead at all. He demonstrated he could pass horses, but he could never really get there. And for him to take to the wet track, which that Candy Ride pedigree often leads to horses running well in wet conditions, but really took the kickback well. They kept him. James Graham, I thought, did a beautiful job jockeying this horse, kept him out of the clear, kept him nice and calm, got him relaxed. And then he had more than enough when he kicked for home and looked really good. So super impressive in Confidence Game. Like I said, flattered the form of some other horses. And I think you absolutely have to consider a big time threat because he's a lock for the starting gate now. And I think he's among the favorites if he decides to run that Arkansas Derby or potentially Louisiana Derby with Keith DeSormo.
Now, these next two we're going to talk about are, in my opinion, the two most impressive winners of 2023 so far as making it look easy and within a true Derby prep points race field. Instant Coffee at number 3. Bolt Doro, Brad Cox's top rated horse, and the horse has done absolutely nothing wrong. Headed to the Louisiana Derby. Where are you at on Instant Coffee? Is he too high, too low? What are we doing?
No, he's right about he's right where I like him. I have him 3 on my list, and I think he's really good. I think he's a horse who's had his form flattered. 2 fills, comes back, runs well in the Risen Star. Confidence Game, who he beat by 9.5 lengths, comes back to win the Rebel. So he's had his form continually flattered by this. And I just think he's a horse that, he's a horse that beat Rocket Can as well. So, I mean, he's beat a lot of these other horses. And
he's the most flattered horse. He's the most flattered horse by that, who he's matched up with and what they've done since. He definitely looks
absolutely. And so he's not super flashy is my only thing. He's a grinder, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just, he doesn't have blazing speed up on the front end. He doesn't have this kind of amazing turn of foot like Red Route 1 does coming for home, but he just wears you down. And that tells me something. He's going to like the distance. He reminds me, honestly, a horse that we saw this past weekend reminds me of Country Grammar a little bit. In that he just grinds and grinds and grinds. And next thing you know, you look up and guess who's at the winner's circle? Instant Coffee. So I think he's a very talented horse.
Yeah, I definitely think he's I agree. I think he's right about where he belongs. Number two is the horse that I think we agree has the highest performance in 2023 so far, Arabian Night. Yeah. Now officially under the Yak team tent. Glad to see that happen. I hope it happens for the other 2 horses that we were worried about being ineligible. But this horse, I think this is the most talented of the group, possibly, along with a couple others. I do like Tapit Trice about as far as ceiling goes, but Arabian Night has already proven it to me. In a decent field at least. So,
absolutely.
What are your thoughts on Arabian Night, and where's he going?
Well, that's the big question. And I think that is where we're waiting for the other shoe to drop with the other potential Baffert horses. The most likely answer is the Arkansas Derby because he's run all of his races in the Midwest. He ran the Southwest at Oaklawn. It would make sense to keep him out there. The thing is, now Reincarnate's out there. And there's all those. Now Yak Teen suddenly has a backlog of horses in California. So are some of these horses that are out in the San Felipe this week going to come to Arkansas to run in the Arkansas Derby as well? Does Arabian Night, who trains out at Santa Anita, is he going to stay out in Santa Anita and run out there? It's a lot of moving pieces, I feel like, but it's the Santa Anita or the Arkansas. Those are the 2. But super talented horse, and I'm also glad to see the barn change because I want to see him run up against the best and have a shot for the Run for the Roses.
And I do think he's going to. I feel like for some reason that he's going to end up in the Santa Anita Derby because he does train there and because,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think there's any doubt that he's got what it takes to win that with and get those points. So number 1, Forte, and we are going to see him back, baby, this weekend at Gulfstream. And I know some people are high on him, living on that Breeders' Cup performance.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the, you know, if you look at his training sheets, his times, his works, I don't know. Is he back to the form that won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile? Is he ready?
Yeah, I think that's the big question. And somebody made a really great point that the Palm Meadows workout facility tends to be a little bit slower than the Gulfstream Park main track. So you don't get maybe the eye-popping 5 furlong works that you see sometimes on the main track at Gulfstream Park. That said, I would say if there's ever a time to play against Forte, to play against him in the Fountain of Youth. Coming back from a 4-month layoff, he's had 5 registered works, which is a good amount, but I mean, it's not like he's been training in the background for a while. And I'll just say the goal for Forte is not to win the Fountain of Youth. That's not his goal. His goal is to win the Kentucky Derby. So if he runs 2nd or 3rd at the Fountain of Youth, what I would just tell people is what Aaron Rodgers tells Packers fans all the time. RELAX. Relax. This horse
has the playoffs, if you will.
Exactly. This horse has got a different goal, and his goal is not to win a prep race. His goal is to win the whole thing. So again, is he all the way cranked up for this one? Probably not. Is he going to be all the way cranked up for the Bluegrass after this? Probably. And we know he likes Keeneland. So I think that's the one I'm more interested in seeing him run. How does he run the Bluegrass in 6 weeks from now?
I'll say this about Forte. I won't be betting against him. I won't, you know, to me, until I, you know, maybe get more of a feel when I see the live odds on Saturday, but this is going to be a very interesting betting race because there are 3 or 4 horses going to take some money, but Forte you might get a bargain on him if you are going to bet him. I think compared to what, you know, he might have been a couple months back, but
for sure. Who
knows? It's going to be fun. All right, Matt, anything else to close it out? Because we have run long on the top 25.
There's always a lot to talk about, but no, nothing else to add other than to make sure to check out all of our YouTube coverage here on the Kentucky Derby, all the graded stakes races taking place this week on Trust the Profits.
Yeah, we got a ton of good stuff. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.